Hello, and welcome to Brief and Hours for Sales Leaders. We promise to be brief, bright, and bring it all to you in 19 minutes. Today, we're going to be talking about 4 key tips for attracting and hiring millennials for sales positions. I'm Drea Douglas, Director of Talent Management Consulting at the Brooks Group, and I'm joined today by Laura Lloyd, Regional Vice President of Sales at the Brooks Group.
Good afternoon. Before we get started, let's define what we mean by millennial. For the purpose of today's Brief and Hour, we're defining millennials as the group of people born between the late 70s, early 80s, into the mid-90s. Millennials have a different approach to achieving happiness compared to previous generations, and today we'll be looking at ways to attract and hire them. We're going to go ahead and jump right into our first tip. Universities are recognizing the viability of careers in sales, and in fact, more than 70 colleges and universities now offer programs to train students in sales skills.
You know, I was actually kind of surprised about that, Laura, when I heard about this. We all know that colleges and universities traditionally offer business degrees, and that's kind of a macro view of business, how to make a business plan, that type of thing, entrepreneurship perhaps. But I was really surprised to learn that sales organizations are actually offering more practical sales certifications to learn the actual practical tips. In fact, I remember you telling me the other day about your son taking college tour. Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, we saw a building on a campus we were touring recently, and they completely dedicated a building to their school of sales. It had classrooms and a training facility. And the graduates of these programs already are going to have base knowledge of how to sell value and handle objections. And they'll come into your company a step ahead of the game, unlike others that don't. The knowledge of the basics will help them pick up your standardized sales processes with ease and contribute to the results much faster than anybody that doesn't have those skills.
Right. Not only that, but millennials, more than any other generation, are equipped to use technology with a changing sales funnel and understand concepts such as inbound marketing, prospecting, and especially social selling. They've all been doing that their whole lives, right? Selling themselves on Facebook and Snapchat and whatnot. All of which are transforming the B2B sales model.
Yeah, the tech-savvy kids are going to be helpful in the future.
Exactly. With a renewed academic focus on sales, companies have a real opportunity here to work with these universities to help build a sustainable talent pipeline. On to tip number 2. Now that you know where to go, how do you attract these young, intelligent, ambitious millennials? You need to be actively building your employer brand. Remember, millennials trust reviews and recommendations from peers and review sites like Glassdoor.com. So if you want your company to be perceived a certain way, you have to live up to the claims you make. Think of all the times, for example, that you've used Yelp or something like that to help you pick a restaurant. Millennials are taking the same approach to picking an employer. So maybe even consider proposing a call to action to your existing employees in the context of your current environment, of course. So in order to keep the finger on the pulse of the environment at your company, we recommend leveraging software tools like TinyPulse. These tools send a brief question out to your staff and allows them to respond anonymously, crucial, so you know where you stand as an employer before putting a call to action like that out to your employees. You need to make sure that they're satisfied.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, the Brooks Group uses TinyPulse weekly, which includes a feature called Cheers for Peers, which I love that. It allows the employees the opportunity to recognize individuals within a company for outstanding work, or commendation. And we actually scrolled the cheers on a digital screen in our office of our lobby for everybody to see, kind of like our brag board.
Yeah.
Another idea is to establish an employee referral program. When successful young talent recruit peers, it breaks down the barriers and builds interest and can also reduce the hiring costs and speed the hiring process. And we've actually seen it here at the Brooks Group.
Right, absolutely. So let's walk through some ways to build your employer brand. Millennials value more than just basic benefits. We keep hearing this over and over again. They don't prioritize how much money they make as much as their work-life balance or other things that they consider important in their life. So including benefits that add to a well-balanced life, like flexible vacation policy, flexible work arrangements, like remote work opportunities, comprehensive wellness programs. You can even think about including or offering gym memberships to your employees. I've read many articles of companies instating those programs where they pay their employees to work out during the day.
That.
Right? In fact, I think we have yoga this Friday.
Yes, we do.
Here in our office. You also want your people to be fulfilled doing their job. Of course, we all want to feel fulfilled and engaged in our work. If you match someone's natural motivators to the job requirements, they'll be engaged and work won't feel like drudgery. Also, millennials want to know that they'll be able to grow and advance their careers. Make it clear that you're invested in your employees and provide ongoing training and advancement opportunities. This creates avenues for vertical growth.
Yeah, when it comes to recruiting and retention, company culture is often more important to the millennials than the salary or the benefits. It determines whether or not they'll be truly happy in their day-to-day life at your company. The Brooks Group incorporates all of these steps into our culture and recruiting strategy. In fact, we're repeatedly named by the Triad Business Journal as the best place to work. And this kind of recognition really goes a long way in attracting the millennial talent. It's important to them.
Mm-hmm.
And remember, you don't want to pitch a job to the millennials. You want to pitch a fulfilling and meaningful career because that's going to speak to them much more.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to move on to tip number 3. We touched on this subject on the last tip, but it's really important enough that it be a tip of its own. People feel fulfilled and engaged when they're doing work that naturally motivates them. And this is especially important for millennials who value job satisfaction over monetary incentives, as you were saying, and determine exactly what a position requires for success and use the interview process to find the candidate with the right behaviors, motivators, and also soft skills, or what we call real skills, and make sure that it matches the job.
Right, exactly. In fact, we took questions before the briefing-hour, and one of our registrants asked how to look for candidates that are self-motivated and driven. So this really gets at the heart of the concept of motivation.
Mm-hmm.
What is that? And all of us fall into this trap that we assume that people are motivated by the same things we are. Everybody loves this, right? I love it. You love it, of course.
Right.
But that's not true. And for sales leaders or people who are a part of a sales organization inside of a business, often assume that everybody's motivated by things like money, for example.
Mm-hmm.
We're all motivated by money, right? Because I am, and that's really fun to run cost-benefit analyses and have incentives that we are rewarded based on performance. But that's a trap to believe that, actually. Some people, in fact, are demotivated if you place an incentive on their performance, and may even perform more poorly if you do that. So it's important to understand and measure what motivates a person, and to ask yourself, what does this job reward?
Mm-hmm.
Matching those two things, what the person is motivated by and what the job rewards. In sales jobs, most of the time, that's incentives, financial incentives, ROI. If somebody's not motivated by that, they're going to perform poorly, and you're going to be scratching your head saying, this great person, why aren't they performing?
Mm-hmm. That's exactly it. Another registrant asked if we could include tips on how to hire a sales individual that will match their top sales performer, kind of cloning it.
Right.
So I think you were going to answer this one.
Yeah, so basically, the first thing to consider here really is we got to take a step back.
Mm-hmm.
When you ask this question, you're trying to clone your top sales performer, but really, think about this. What is that? How long has that top performer been at your organization? Maybe they've been there for a long time. What are the circumstances under which they've been successful? And does that match what you're trying to, where you're trying to take your company into the future? So what basically I'm trying to say here is that your top performers today may not be wired in the way that you need people to be wired to take your company into the future. Mm-hmm. So the first thing to consider here is not just who the top performers are now in the role, but where the company's trying to go. For this reason, we recommend creating a position benchmark. It reverse engineers the role to ask the question, if the job could talk, what would it tell us?
And that's going to help you find the ideal candidate.
Absolutely. Tip number 4 gets into, really the biggest difference between millennials and the generation before them is the importance they place on meaningful work. They typically place less value on high levels of pay because what this emerging workforce is really after is a career that allows them to engage in work they find genuinely meaningful. For example, I had a call just the other day with a client, and this is what I do on a regular basis. I consult with organizations to help them find the candidates from their candidate pool who are at the highest likelihood of success in their organization. So they had a candidate that was a candidate because they were trying to leave their employer. Mm-hmm. Now, their employer, it was their first job out of college, right, and they went to go work for an employer that sells essentially Vice.
What do you mean by Vice?
By Vice, without getting into too much detail, basically the product that they sold did not contribute to the health and well-being of the individual. So people buy this thing for enjoyment, but it actually erodes your health as opposed to making you healthier. Mm-hmm. And this person was actively making a conscious decision to target an employer that has a stated mission of improving lives by improving certain parts of people's health and access to health care.
More in alignment with their values.
Exactly. So this was a millennial. Obviously, it was their first job out of college, and they were looking to make a change. At the Brooks Group, even, I can give you another example. Our purpose is to transform sales organizations so that it's easier for customers to buy. We believe that professional selling can be a noble career. Great selling isn't about manipulation or persuasion. It's about helping your client identify a challenge or growth opportunity and recommending the best solution. Since we communicate that purpose clearly across the organization, all employees know they're working to help improve people's lives.
Yeah, and that's what motivates us all here. We do ultimately like to help the client out.
Exactly. Now, you can also use the interview process as a chance to communicate how and why the role is pivotal to your organization. So starting early and stating it often goes a long way to make them feel like they're not just filling a cubicle. And the last bullet here, let them know that their talents will be valued and put to use. You can use specifics on their resume to suggest unique ways they can contribute to the organization, asking them about their hobbies, interests, and extracurricular activities can help you find ways to suggest how they may be incorporated into the job, even if it's just part of the culture building. So it's not necessarily directly impacting the bottom line, but it's leading to much more engagement among your staff. For example, somebody who likes to volunteer and they're altruistically motivated, you could suggest that they head up the food donation program your company's been looking to get started with.
In fact, at the Brooks Group, we created a team called the Culture Club, and the primary function of the group is to plan and schedule events and service projects that are voted on by the employees of the company, and it's to support camaraderie and also make personal connections with the employees, doing something outside of work. So it kind of takes you away from there and you get to build those interpersonal skills. So we'd like to go ahead and recap the 4 tips for hiring and recruiting millennials. Number 1, make sure you target college grads from colleges that have sales certificate programs. Build your brand as an employer. Identify candidates matched for the position. And communicate purpose behind the job. Did we have time for one more question, Drea?
Actually, we do. And if you have questions, we're happy to take them. So now's the time. If you'd like to ask a question about anything that we've presented today, go ahead in the chat feature here, type your question, and we'll be happy to answer it. But we did have another question from a registrant before the briefing. I actually really liked his statement, and if you're listening now, you may recognize your question. He said, and I'm just going to quote here, "Being a millennial myself, I'm fully aware of some of our weaknesses as employees. For example, tardiness, lack of commitment, lack of humility, etc. Are there questions that will draw out or ways to know whether the individual suffers from these issues? And what are some ways to know if what's being said is true or typical, say whatever to get the job?" That's a great question. And that's some pretty fundamental stuff, actually, based on what we do here at the Brooks Group day in and day out, is to recommend questions to ask in the interview process to clarify important issues that may come up in their assessment results. So the first step, of course, is to assess. You need to understand how this person is wired and if whether they match what the job requires in their behaviors, their motivation, and their personal skills. So then you can actually verify. You have this data-driven, scientific, objective, quote-unquote, proof of who they really are, and then you can gauge that against what they've been telling you in the interview process. So that goes a long way into helping you understand who they really are versus what
Right.
what they might just be telling you.
Do we have any more questions?
We do have another question. Fred has asked us to repeat the 4 things.
Oh, sure. So the 4 tips for hiring and recruiting millennials is to target college grads from colleges that have sales certificate programs, and build your brand as an employer, identify candidates matched for the position, and communicate purpose behind the job. And just so you know, we will be emailing this out to everybody. Did we have any more questions? Okay, and no more?
That's it.
All right, so if you have open positions and currently aren't using our assessments, we would like to give you the opportunity to try it out. So as I said, we will be sending out the recording to everybody from today's webinar, briefinar, excuse me, the slides, as well as information about the assessments. We want to leave you with a quote and food for thought in the context of a job from Simon Sinek. Working hard for something you don't care about is called stress. Working hard for something we love is called passion. Let's make sure that your people are passionate in the role that they're in or that they're hired for. And we want to thank you for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed the briefinar and have a few good takeaways from today's session. And we hope to see you the next time.